One, this is our last episode of 2020. We made it, didn't we? So thanks for joining us for all these many, many months as you watched these episodes of Mondays with Mundy. And today, which is December 28th, we're close to the end of the year, actually marks an important period of the league's history because it was on December 27th of 1862 that the Union League was officially organized as the Union League of Philadelphia. So we're going to go back in time and see what it was like during the fall and early winter of 1862 when some very determined Philadelphians decided to create this patriotic social society. So we're going to see a film, believe it or not, that was produced to correspond with the opening exhibit in the Heritage Center when the Heritage Center opened in September of 2011. And the exhibit was called Love of Country Reads, curated by yours truly. So this will be a nice change of pace. You don't have to look at me all the time and listen to me and stuff like that. So, but I think you'll really appreciate and understand what it was like to be in Philadelphia in the fall of 1862. So let's get started, shall we?
1862 was a disastrous year. Instead of the Union Army taking Richmond as we had expected, the rebels were advancing and leaving a terrible trail of blood. Late that autumn, we feared for the worst. The Confederates would march right into Philadelphia, take the city, and win the war. Though it's not spoken of much anymore, there were influential men, quite a few of them in fact, behind the rebel cause. Copperheads, we called them. It's no secret they like to gather at the Philadelphia Club. Right into the lion's den, you might say. This wasn't exactly foreign territory. George had always been a member of the club. After all, his father was president of the Girard Bank. But at Princeton, his views had broadened. And now he was a literary man. All that is to say, he deplored the hypocrisy of those who supported slavery. And they probably saw him as a traitor. The leader of the Copperheads was the lawyer, Charles Ingersoll, a political giant. I suppose he thought he could disarm Mr. Boker.
Well, hello, George. Sit, have a cigar.
No.
You don't think it's time to end this little game? You know yourself how much this war's costing us. But how do you justify saving the Union by tearing it apart? It isn't worth it, George. You know that. Now tell me, do you really think these differences can't be overcome with a little conciliation and compromise?
I think George was truly feeling disillusioned. It certainly did seem like the city was filled with traitors, and he took it personally. To tell the truth, so did I. Well, it was by chance that we met on 7th Street. A bright November day, but I remember both of us feeling a gloom.
This chill, Mr. Boker. I'm afraid it mirrors my state of mind.
Judge, what has happened to our city?
There's an awful lot of men in league with the traitors.
Oh, this place practically reeks with copperheads. And they're the ones walking around with their heads held high, exulting in our discomfort, while our Union boys lay dying in the fields.
Yes, and I can tell you that many eagerly await our government's overthrow, and yet we do practically nothing.
Might we not at least remove ourselves from all social relations with these copperheads?
Well then, we should set up a society of our own. Disloyal men excluded.
George surprised a lot of people, but it wasn't unusual. When he saw something had to be done, he did it. Just after we met, he went over to Morton McMichael's office. McMichael was the publisher of the North American newspaper. That's where we patriots often gathered. And there, they encountered the brilliant lawyer Benjamin Gerhardt.
George and I have been talking about forming a club, only for men who support the Union.
I should say it's about time. Now, I do lament the way the city has been split apart, but I believe we have been given no choice. Now, I'm also willing to bet that we are not alone. Tell you what, let's see how many come to a first meeting. Now, I'll host it, but I'm afraid we don't have a moment to spare.
Well, we took our first steps. After the meeting at Gerhardt's, there were 5 more, and with each one, momentum seemed to build. Dr. Miggs hosted the 7th, a couple of days after Christmas. We were to vote on official bylaws.
Articles of Association.
I don't think any of us saw what was coming. There was an issue to confront. Who should be allowed to join our league? We had our share of radical Republicans, like Mr. Gibbons, fierce abolitionists. But there were pragmatic Democrats, too. Mr. Doherty was the most outspoken.
And unwavering support for the Republican Party for the suppression of this rebellion.
Not for me. Not for me. I am for the Union, and not for any Republican president.
My friend, it is merely a matter of semantics.
Oh, listen here. I am no adherent of Lincoln. I opposed his election to the last, and I feel no partisan interest in the success of his administration. But I deem it a duty, a holy duty, to do all I can to sustain my country in this war on this hideous and hell-born rebellion.
I am sorry, gentlemen, but listen to what this man is saying. His words are dangerous. It is no time for people facing both ways. If it is not possible for anyone here, then there is the door. The work will go on without you.
Let me just say, I am in sympathy with Mr. Gibbons. If this were a social club or a political club, I would stand with him. But what have we come to do? Assuredly, it is to unite the friends of the Union against its foes. Is it not, therefore, our duty to take in anyone who might contribute? If we can persuade eminent Democrats like Mr. Doherty, is this not an advance? I can understand how someone might agree with Mr. Lincoln over the war and not on other issues. But why concern ourselves with these academic differences? The only test of admission should therefore be support of the Union.
From that moment, things began to move quickly. It was now abundantly clear that the Union would never prevail without broad political support. So the first thing we set out to do was create a chain of Union leagues across the nation.
From Albany to Chicago. From Boston to San Francisco, my friend. And George, you ought to lead the march.
Before long, there were some 700 Union leagues across the country. It's hard to believe. A few months before, we had been helpless. Now, we had our own civilian army.
What I'm referring to, gentlemen, is the war of ideas.
Pamphlets, then?
No, that won't do. Not just pamphlets, but imagine using every written form possible. Books, posters, poems, circulars, broadsides, and not 100, no, my friends, but millions of copies.
In the plain language of every man.
In German, too, and on every subject.
Every day we assailed the enemy. All those pamphlets and materials, and we raised millions for the fight. We organized regiments, too, of white and black men. We opened a recruitment office for colored troops, and thousands joined. No small thing as the North finally turned the tide. How can I forget that spring night, April 10th, 1865? The long-hoped-for news finally arrived.
Gentlemen, I have just received a telegram. War Department, Washington. The department has just received official report of the surrender this day of General Lee and his army on the terms proposed by General Grant.
Well, Judge, it is done.
It is indeed, Mr. Boker. I look back on that moment, on the war and the work we did. We answered a call that came from our hearts. I think about those days every day, not merely to relive the glory and the joy and the relief. It's because the fight isn't over. We proved once what courage and skill could accomplish. Why, it changed the course of the world. In the end, George said the wings of freedom soared a little higher. Now, as we look ahead, we have to ask ourselves, how much higher might they go?
Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Different, isn't it? It really is. So great stuff. And I hope it gives you a better idea of just what it was like to be in Philadelphia in December of 1862 and the balance of power that was going on between everybody. So our thanks to the Abraham Lincoln Foundation, which is now the Legacy Foundation. And it was the Abraham Lincoln Foundation that made this whole video possible. And so we're very grateful to that foundation, and we're grateful to everybody for all the good things that have happened this year. And despite all the sadness, there's been a lot of good stuff. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you in 2021. And let's hope for a better, kinder, and gentler year. So thanks, everyone. Take care, stay well, stay safe, and Happy New Year.